Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Kane, Senate Bill 7 was considered in your House Committee on Elections last week. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're the chairman of that committee, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I review the bill, it seems that both the Senate Bill 7 and House Bill 6 have identical captions. Is that correct?
Now they do. Yeah, now they do. After we did a committee substitutes of 7, now it has the same caption.
So yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I reviewed the committee substitute to Senate Bill 7, which was considered in the Elections Committee, it seems that the bill language itself is maybe not identical, but nearly identical to the current version of House Bill 6. Is that correct?
I'm under the impression of the same thing. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you believe they're identical. You chose a peculiar term in drafting this bill, and it's on page 1, line 12. Do you have a copy of the bill in front of you?
I do. Yes, sir.
And you talked about preserving the purity of the ballot box. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a quotation from the Texas Constitution. It would be Article 6, Section 4.
Right. And are you aware of the history behind that provision of the Constitution?
I'm not.
Okay. Are you aware that references to, quote, purity of the ballot box used throughout this country's history has been a justification for states to disenfranchise groups they deem unfit to vote or somehow lacking?
I didn't know that. I thought it meant...
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Anchia.
Can you kindly direct our guests in the gallery to refrain from outbursts?
The chair will remind members, guests in the gallery to refrain from outbursts. This is your first warning. Please contain yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, so I wasn't aware of that. I guess I thought purity meaning not having fraud in it or something. And,
Okay. Are you aware of the 1972 Supreme Court case Dunn versus Blumenstein?
I'm not.
All right. In that case, they noted that statements, quote, related to the preservation of purity at the ballot box, while a formidable sounding state interest, cannot be used to justify any and all voting requirements that a state might think up, end quote. Did you run across this explanation when you specifically used that term?
No, not at all.
What was your motivation for using that term purity at the ballot box? Because that's a specific set of words that has a lot of meaning in state history.
Well,
what was your intention?
I'm going to answer for you. You know, you may have figured it out by now. I really like the state constitution, and I think as a legislative body, just as Congress should, they should be looking for their authority from their charter, from the thing that gives them power. And so when we're looking at what authorizes us, right, the sovereign people of the state of Texas who delegated their authority through the Constitution, we then should look to the Constitution and say, what gives us authority to do anything on this issue? And that's the provision that does that. And so that would be why.
And do you know what the motivation was for that Texas Constitution? And you're referring specifically to the Texas Constitution of 1876, correct?
Yeah, our current Constitution, yes.
All right.
Did
you look at the history before using that word?
No. The only thing, if we were to have a discussion, maybe over some coffee or a drink, somebody I could go into the details of Article 1 really well. I've read the debates in the journals of the Convention of 1875 on that for that thing, but I'm not familiar with the one.
You may have missed it then.
Article 6.
And this would have been very obvious, I think, to anybody who looked at that and looked at that language. And that provision was drafted specifically to disenfranchise black people, black voters, in fact, following the Civil War. Did you know that?
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
And are you familiar with white primaries?
We've heard and read of such thing. I'm glad
have you read
that's
about
gone.
those?
It's a disgusting thing. Yes.
Did you realize that purity of the ballot box language in the Texas Constitution gave rise to all white primaries?
No, I didn't.
And did you know that this purity at the ballot box justification was also used during the Jim Crow era to prevent black people from voting?
No, those are troubling things. I didn't know that was their
Did
reason.
you know that in states across the country that penal disenfranchisement schemes were put in place, including in Texas, as far back as 1845, to effectively lock African American people out of the political process? Are you aware of this history?
You know, I think we've said a few times that I wasn't aware of any kind of malicious intent in the use of that term.
Okay.
And the reason it was used is I looked at the Constitution because I believe our authority is derived from the people, and that's why.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Anchia.
given the importance of this subject to the voting rights of all Texans, I move that we extend time for all question period for the pendency of this debate.
Mr. Anchia, I cannot recognize you for that motion, but I can recognize you for the extension of time right now.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I therefore move that the gentleman's time be extended.
A third extension does require unanimous consent. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman's time is extended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, because we have that history in place and the references in your bill that evoke some of that very dark history in our state, I wanted to ask you, I want to fast forward to the last decade. Are you aware that there have been multiple findings of intentional discrimination against African Americans and Latinos by the state legislature, found by 3 federal courts?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but I believe you've said it. By the way, I'd be totally fine with an amendment to maybe strike the word purity and say integrity or something, if you want to offer that.
Okay. No, I was just curious, because I think language is important, and the language you chose to use in this bill might reflect on one's intent, because if you are a student of the Texas Constitution, as you said you were, I think that might be probative, and that's why I wanted to ask those questions. Because of the history that we just outlined, that you said you were generally aware of, you weren't exactly sure of the number of times, I will tell you that in the D.C. Circuit Court, in an El Paso court, and in a 3-judge panel composed of 2 Republican appointees and 1 Democratic appointees, there were findings of intentional discrimination against the Texas legislature, specifically against communities of color. So in light of that history, can you tell me why you did not do a racial impacts analysis on how this legislation would affect people of color?
Well, Representative, you had asked if I was familiar with it. And when were those, by the way? Because I wasn't, and so...
I'm sorry. It was from 2010 to 2020, in the last decade.
Yeah. I'd like to pretend that I was younger than that. I really don't recall that, and so your question's based on in light of this.
Were you genuinely aware? Have you heard that
I wasn't
has
aware
been
of it, and so I couldn't be in light of that, and therefore do this, in spite of or something. And so I'm not aware of it, sir.
Okay. Well, given that history, did you ever give thought to how this legislation might impact African Americans? Did you ever give it thought?
Did I give it a thought? Yeah, and if I thought somehow that this was designed to have some animus against any people group, it wouldn't have been written that way. In fact, due to the number of this bill, I don't think our speaker would have allowed it to be done that way. I don't think we'd have as many people signed on to it. They wouldn't have done that. I don't think the members of the committee would have voted for it or supported if it did that. So no, I didn't.
Well, it's difficult.
It crossed my mind, but I didn't think it did it, and so.
So as a result, in an effort to make sure that there was, forget the intentional discrimination that occurred in Voting Rights Matters during just the last decade, did you worry that there might be a discriminatory effect, even if you thought there was no discriminatory intent? Because under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, we have a discriminatory effect standard. Did you ever look to see if there might be or solicit a third-party analysis or any third-party testimony about the racial impact of this bill?
You know, what I can tell you is in crafting it, there were things that people had proposed and brought us, and when I read those things, I thought, man, that I don't like that. That looks bad, and so we rejected it. Does that make sense?
Because you didn't like it.
No, because I'm thinking, no, these are bad things. These are things that I actually thought might have
And what does bad mean to you?
something that would have a disparate impact on somebody, something that could go, hey, you know, that I think that's wrong.
And how did you make that call?
Just kind of by your heart, kind of a gut feeling.
It was your gut feeling, right? It was, you know, you may not have known, but you just thought it was your gut feeling that, hey, that feels bad to me, and I don't want it to be in my bill, right? Is that what you're saying?
You know, from people that we talked with, there's lawyers.
Is that what you're saying? Like you said, it came from your gut, and you
no,
thought,
begin.
There's some stuff
Okay.
that would be bad.
So here's how
right?
it begins.
Mr.
Anchia, if you allow me to answer the question, please.
Well, I'd
so
love
you
for
look
you to
at it and you
answer
go,
the
man,
question
you know, I don't like that.
that
And I'm
is
going to go
being
talk to.
asked.
I'm going to go talk to.
And I'm going to say your words back.
And I'm going to go talk to
you.
other members about it because you're construing it. Let me finish. You see something, you go, man, I'm not sure about that. That happens in this chamber all the time. And then we go and talk to people. Go, hey, I think maybe that's not good. You agree? And then other people say, yeah, and so that's why I wouldn't have come in.
And so to whom in the chamber did you discuss these things?
You know, members of the committee and friends and other people, yeah.
So you asked members of the committee if proposals might have a disparate impact on Latinos and African Americans. Is that what you're saying to the body?
No, not like that. What I'm saying is, would you know, hey, I'm not sure about this. Is that bad? And you know, maybe they'd agree.
And what was their analysis when you asked them?
I'm not saying any of this is about some racial impact. What I'm saying is whether we thought, maybe, you know, I don't think that actually helps people.
But the question was specifically about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and not discriminatory effect, but intent, but rather discriminatory effect. So
I don't recall you mentioning.
I've allowed you to finish your
Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So I'm sorry.
I have allowed you to finish your answers. So if you could allow me to restate my question again.
Is it on the bill?
You said you were, for lack of a better term, deciding what would go in and not go in to the bill based on your gut feeling. And some things you did not put in the bill because of that gut feeling, or because, as you have said, you spoke to other members of the committee about those things. Did you ever think to ask for testimony in your committee on racial impact from this legislation?
Will you allow me to answer your question?
Yes, okay. That is a very specific question. Did you ever do that?
All right, so you had phrased it, and I was talking about going to go with a gut feeling. I wasn't talking about impact on any kind of particular thing.
Well, that was the frame of the question.
Well, you keep bringing up the gut feeling thing, so I think I need to clarify it. What that means is, you know, I thought that wasn't good law or something.
What is good law here?
I think anything
what does that mean
treats
to you?
Everybody
what is good
equally
law?
And make sure that watchers aren't excluded, that they're able to watch the process, to make sure that it's fair, that we don't have people that are receiving assistance being taken advantage of. You know,
but in making good law,
it
doesn't sound like you're including understanding what the impact is on African Americans or Latinos, right? Because you did not do that. Is that correct?
Did we have an impact study done? No. And I think I've answered that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Why did you not have one done? If you were trying to figure out what might constitute good or bad law, and you knew that rather than having a discriminatory intent, which you're telling us today this bill does not have, that it might have a discriminatory effect.
This bill is designed to protect all voters, and so I guess because I didn't think this was treating anyone differently, I wouldn't have thought there was a reason to study it, because it literally is about all.
Were you ever asked in committee by a member of the committee to do such a
Actually,
study?
Someone asked, had we performed one, and that question was done, and I answered it then that one wasn't done.
Okay, and did you think to do one after that request had been made?
No, I didn't think so. I didn't think that was necessary, because I believe that this bill is designed to protect all voters, every single one of them.
Because
from being
because it was
taken
because you thought that this bill was neutral, and you trusted that gut feeling. You trusted how you felt about the bill, right?
Recall that you'd asked, you're trying to pin me down on the gut feeling thing, and I told you that was about whether I like language or not. It wasn't about
I'm just restating your terms.
Yeah, but it wasn't about that in context. I was trying to reestablish context. So, in writing it, whether we think words are good or bad, must or shall, those kind of different things. Yeah. But no, this wasn't about.
Can you describe what types of voter fraud this is intended to stop, this bill? Because you said earlier that this is about protecting voters and sort of allowing people to watch polls. What fraud is it designed to stop?
Okay, yeah. Well, we're trying to maybe stop what we call ballot harvesting.
And what does that mean to you?
That means when someone's, compensated in order to go and harvest votes. I mean, they're being paid. In fact, I prefer the word ballot trafficking more.
What do those terms mean to you? Walk me through how ballot trafficking works.
Okay, let's go to the section of the code that'll fit it for us. We're going to go to chapter 276 in our code.
Okay.
And so we're going to go to 276.014.
And what page is it in your bill?
I'll find it. Yeah. Here we go. So 276.014 is entitled Paid Vote Harvesting. And the purpose there is to, you can't have any benefit. So vote harvesting means a direct interaction with one or more voters in connection with an official ballot.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Speaker, would you recognize me for a motion to extend time?
Mr. Anchia, we do not extend time beyond 3 extensions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.